if you go around constantly pretending that everything is sunshine and roses, you are not at all processing and facing some of the things that are going to come back to haunt you in your mental health. So to me, truth is how you straddle that line between positivity and toxic positivity. If people ask me how I'm doing and I'm having a rough day, I tell them I'm having a rough day. I'm honest about it. I think where people get confused is they feel like you can't tell the truth that you're having a rough day, and that is false. The thing of it is, you don't want to just dwell on it. That's where you get into that negativity, and that holds you back. If you're going to be honest about what your emotion is or what you're feeling at that moment, that leaves you room to process that emotion effectively.
I'm Nikki Herda, and this is Bright, Stories of Hope and Innovation in Michigan Classrooms, a podcast where we celebrate our state's educators and explore the future of learning. Bright is brought to you in part by Mimic Insurance Company, insuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit mimic.com/quote to see how much you can save. Today's episode of Bright, I chat with Jodie Kleymeer, a media specialist for Lakeshore Public Schools who teaches a help desk class for students. Jodie shares her own journey in discovering mindfulness in the midst of the pandemic, explores the relationship between mindfulness, positivity, and mental health, and shares 3 tips for bringing mindfulness into the classroom. All right, Jodie. Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the Bright podcast today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Nikki. This is very exciting.
Oh, yay. We've been kicking off this season by asking everybody, can you tell me about the most interesting project that you're doing right now at your school, and specifically in your media center there?
Yes. So one of the things that some of my veteran students are doing is using a lot of the different Google's applied skills modules. And so they're doing fun things like making these little talk bots and programming them, and learning about how to not just create like a safe password, but running it through all these different detectors and seeing if this one can get broken. And so they're just doing some really fun stuff that Google has pre-made for a classroom, and they're having a blast at it.
What kind of skills do you feel like that imparts to the students, having experience with that?
Well, they've definitely been having to do some problem-solving skills. One of my students was trying to get his robot to say hi, and it kept saying, "Hello, world." He's like, "I just typed in hi." So, yes, they have to do a lot of problem-solving skills. It makes them, read the text multiple times and really do some critical thinking to figure out what they're doing wrong. And then, of course, they have to have some sort of creativity to be able to program it to do whatever it is that they've decided they want this talkbot to do, whether it's, tell jokes or greet people or whatever they're having it do. So.
Awesome. And this is something you said that's freely available, put out by Google for classrooms?
Yes, I believe that all I did was Google, applied Google skills, and it came up, and it has tons of different lessons covering lots of different subject areas and topics. And so you can do anything from just learning how to organize Google Drive, or learning how to use Sheets in depth, or creating a budget, all kinds of really cool things. I know I've had my kids in the past do ones where they're pretending like they're buying a car, but they actually have to look up real cars and figure out different, if the interest rate is this much, and if they put this much down, what are the payments, and all different kinds of things like that are very practical. I have juniors and seniors, so it's something that they really need to know how to do.
But yeah, that's really neat to hear about that free resource that's available that others could use, and to just hear about some examples and the skills that can be imparted to kids through this free tool.
I think that's one of the favorite things about my class. My kids learn everything from the Dewey Decimal System and how to reshelve the books to repairing Chromebooks, because we have to do that for our district, and cybersecurity and terminating internet cables and all kinds of just very interesting and practical things that cover a myriad of life skills.
Awesome. Well, thank you for what you do for your students. Do you remember when you first wanted to become an educator?
Yes. Oddly enough, I always, from the time I can remember, wanted to be an educator. I'm the oldest of 8. So I taught all my siblings how to read and do math, and we played school before they were in school. I had them in school. And it just, I don't know, it just happened. But then in 6th grade, our teacher was absent one day, my English teacher, and we were diagramming sentences, and the substitute had no clue what was happening there. And so the class was getting, restless and whatnot. And I'm trying to do my work. And I'll admit right now, I'm one of that goody two-shoes kind of a kid. And so I'm trying to do my work, and I'm getting frustrated because the behavior in the class is becoming quite unsettled. And this teacher has no idea what she's doing. Well, because she's not a teacher. She was a bus driver, actually, who was substituting. And so
you get up there and teach?
She literally said, "Does anybody know how to do this or what?" And I said, "Yes," because I had yelled at the kid behind me, like, "If you're not going to do this, at least be quiet so I can work,"
Awesome.
Kind of a deal.
Yeah.
And then she said, "Do you know what we're doing here?" And so I went over to the desk to show her, and she clearly still didn't get it. And she was like, "Do you think you can teach this to the rest of the class?" And so I did. And I had them all, take turns coming up to the board and sharing their hand. And that was when I was like, okay, I have classroom management as a 6th grader.
Wow. That's so great.
And I just picked up this lesson and taught it to the rest of my class. And then when I got back, my teacher was just amazed.
She's like,
how did everybody understand this and do this? And I said, I just taught them.
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that with me. So today we're going to be talking about 3 tips for bringing mindfulness into your classroom. But first I was hoping we could just pause to break down the why a little bit here. So, I guess what I really want to know, since this is something you were nominated because of your work in this area to talk on our podcast. And so I just want to hear, why are you passionate about bringing mindfulness into the classroom? And, why do you think it's important for students? What can it do for them?
Well, I have to tell you that the initial reason that I was even subjected to this topic was because our district really saw teachers, staff members, I'm sure themselves, and students all really struggling in the pandemic. And so about a year ago, maybe a little more, for one of our professional development days, our school district purchased all of us a book, James Porter's Maximizing Mindfulness. And to be honest, I was at a point where I was so overwhelmed because especially that year, we were completely virtual. And I had my help desk class was taken away that year, and I had to teach Greek myth and short story, which was delightful and fabulous, but I hadn't taught in a regular classroom setting for 26 years. And so it was very overwhelming to be suddenly not only teaching subject matter that I don't know, but teaching it in a completely new way, because I was never an online teacher. I never was prepared for that. So very overwhelmed. And when they sent this entire book to us, I just thought, Lord have mercy, I'm barely staying alive, and now you want me to read this big book. Seriously. But curiosity got the better of me.
As it so often does to teachers, huh?
Right. I thought, well, I better at least know what this is about in case somebody asks me, you know? So the first quote in the publication says, "What starts in the mind as a negative thought often ends up in the body as a very real physical reaction. Have these kinds of thoughts often enough, and you can end up with a very real stress-related disease." And so that resonated with me. I have multiple autoimmune disorders, and it started when I was young. I had a bit of a rough upbringing, and I really identified with that quote. And so right off the bat, it drew me in. And then the very first sentence really stunned me, because the author says, I rejected this concept of mindfulness when it was introduced to me 30 years ago. And I thought, okay, like I was rejecting this before I read this first quote. So, okay, now you've gone ahead and drew me in even further by approaching that skeptic in me. Like, what can this do? What power is this going to have? And he talked about the reason that he kind of thought it was, a little bit frou-frou, was because the author of the book that he was reading had recommended that he be mindful about doing daily things like washing the dishes, like feel the bubbles and feel the temperature and pay attention to the texture of the plate when there's food on it, as opposed to once it's clean and smooth, and listen to the water splashing. And so Mr. Porter was just like, don't we have better things to do? Like, why do we need to think about this? But then later on, he noticed that himself, he'd be in the shower and he'd be thinking, okay, I got a dental appointment later on today. But instead of just kind of making a list that's like productive or something, he starts going on about, well, what if he has a cavity and he have to get his teeth drilled? And, what could happen when I go in there to the dentist? So, like, all these negative outcomes and things. And so he started taking yoga. And when he was in class, he met this woman named Trish. And long story short, after talking to Trish, he found out that she is the Central Park jogger. Lots of our younger fans are not going to recognize this reference, but in 1989, this woman, Trish, was taking a jog in Central Park, and she was attacked. And the doctors really gave her, they called in a person to do her last rites. That's how sure she was in a coma, and they were just sure she was going to die. And she ended up coming out of the coma after 12 days, and she couldn't remember the incident. Her mind had just blocked that out as a safety technique. And she started doing yoga, and she started doing mindfulness. And mindfulness was one of the main things that helped her get back her walking and talking, because when she came out of the coma, she couldn't talk, walk, or read. So Yes. So mindfulness is something that she attributes to her recovery in a major way. And when I read about that, that was very intriguing to me. And then James Porter talks about how he went on a retreat with John Kabat-Zinn. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly, but he is known as Mr. Mindfulness. And apparently on this retreat, something that was said to him that really stuck was that he learned that awareness doesn't get depressed, awareness doesn't get anxiety, and awareness doesn't get angry. And those were things that he had been struggling with. And due to the pandemic and all the isolation, anxiety and depression was something that I had begun struggling with again. But it was different this time because earlier in my life when I struggled with those things, it was a very clear answer why I was depressed and why I was anxious. And this time around, I can't identify a reason. It's just there, and I don't know why. And so I'm learning about those mental health issues in a very real way right now that I never could identify with other people, like about depression and anxiety. I never understood it before because for me in the past, it was a situational thing. So I knew like, okay, once I get out of the situation, I won't have to deal with that so much. And that's how it came out. But this time around, I couldn't figure out the why. And so I felt helpless, like there was no way that I could stop it. And that really has brought me closer to my students because I'm very open with them about my mental health struggles because I know they're having it too. And I don't want them to feel embarrassed or ashamed or guilty or less than because they're struggling with these things. So that was the why for me. I felt like if I'm struggling with this, let me try this for a little bit. So I started it a couple of weeks before school. And honestly, the first semester was just so crazy getting back to school that I still did not weave it into my daily routine with the kids yet. I wasn't sold yet, to be honest. And I just didn't know how to weave it in there. But after I started doing it myself for a while, I noticed my attention getting a little better. And I noticed my ability to control my emotions was getting better. I noticed that I wasn't struggling with the depression and the anxiety as much. It's not like it's gone away. It's not like a magic pill or something, but it helps me cope. And so at the turn of the semester that we just had 3 weeks ago, I decided, okay, you know what? I'm very fortunate because our school is very much invested in our kids' socio-emotional learning. We have 100% backing from our administration on really sharing this with our kids. And I decided, okay, let's do this. Let's try it out and we'll see what happens. So that's the why.
Oh.
That's how I got here.
I really appreciate you sharing that story. And even just being vulnerable and sharing that with us, because I think, probably a lot of people can relate, especially educators in this past year. If you had to give just a brief definition of mindfulness, just your own personal definition, what does it mean to you? Like, how would you describe it to someone who didn't know what it was?
Oh boy. Yes, because there's all these, technical answers and whatnot. For me, it's kind of a lifeline to reaching your own emotional knowledge, and it's a skill that you can hone like any other skill to help you have more accurate focus, and to be more intentional about things, specifically with relationships, honestly. I noticed that I had been feeling very disconnected to people, like looking them right in the eye and still not hearing a thing they say. So this mindfulness was a real lifeline to me to reconnect to people.
Yeah, I've also been pretty interested in it for several years, but more significantly during the pandemic. I think probably a lot of people, when life shut down and you're stuck in your house, you have more time with your own thoughts and feelings, and you can either kind of avoid them or you can develop a relationship with them.
And I'm a single person, so I was literally home alone.
Yeah.
I had cats, but
you got cats too.
And that was fabulous, but they're not great conversationalists or
I'm taking a meditation class right now, actually, and the teacher saw my cat and was like, "Oh, some of my best meditation teachers were cats." And I thought that was pretty great.
That is fabulous. Especially when they kind of pin you down, like you're lying there and you're like, "Ooh, I really want to make dinner," or I need a drink, but you will not move because cat.
Yes, because cat. They are something. So, so it sounds like, it's still pretty new in your, at least, as of the last semester, the last year.
Yes.
You bringing it into the classroom. But I'm curious if so far, if you've gotten any feedback from students, how they're liking it. Have you found it having a positive impact on social emotional learning, on academics? Any initial reactions?
So the initial reaction is that most kids really appreciate. First off, I think it wouldn't even matter what technique I was doing. I think my kids appreciate the fact that somebody's caring enough about their mental health to try and help them. So they're very open to this. I don't have any kids that are like, "No, I'm not doing this," outwardly. I have a couple of kids that are like, "Man, I seem to really stink at this. I cannot get my head to focus." And you are not alone, kiddo. I can tell you when I started doing this, it was constant, redirecting myself, get back here. But I'm definitely getting better at it now, the more I practice it, and I confide in them about that in myself, and let them know that the more you practice this, the better you're going to get at it, just like tying your shoes or playing basketball or whatever. More you practice, the better you get.
Yeah, and that does kind of connect in. I was going to ask, if you've gotten any pushback. It sounds like your students have been super supportive, your district's super supportive, but that's just one question I've always wondered with, I see it as a very, secular thing and something that's been, but I've heard, people have reactions to it because of its affiliation with Eastern religions.
I think the reason that I didn't get any pushback was because when I introduced this, I talked about, that was the very first issue that we talked about. And I said, this is not me trying to push any type of a spiritual belief on you. This is me trying to help you regain a sense of self, a sense of stability, a sense of self-control, and a sense of reconnectedness. So this is a skill. If you want to put your faith into it while we're doing it, that's up to you. But the things that I'm going to show you have nothing to do with that. So we put the kibosh on that right quick. And so any type of misconception they had about what it would be, was right out the door.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's helpful. How would you describe the relationship between mindfulness, positivity, and mental health? And the main reason I ask about the positivity piece is because in our communications before this, you mentioned something about the Mindfulness and Positivity Project. So
Yes.
I was suspecting that they were linked for you, but I'd like to hear more.
Boy, this might have been it was before the pandemic. So 3-4 years ago, our school began a relationship with this positivity project team. There's a veteran and a professor from U of M. I sadly can't remember either of their names, but the idea of this is that you have these 26 characteristics like love and humility and responsibility and kindness and gratitude and creativity, and I can't list them all, but there's a ton of these fabulous characteristics. And then these overarching umbrellas of why other people matter. So, for instance, just having that mindset of being present and, giving others your attention, of knowing that your words and actions affect other people, about being able to positively cheer someone on when they have a success and not be all jealous about it so all these overarching ideas and then these scaffolded characteristics underneath. So each week we have one of those characteristics or those overarching concepts that we try to just take a look at and dive into at some point in time during the week. And to me, that's really related to the mindfulness, because the reason that we're doing the positivity is, again, to be more aware of how you're treating others. So that self-awareness. So to me, they're very much related. And obviously, the more positive the more positive thoughts you have, the more positivity, and the more that you can hold up your character, the better your mental health is going to be. So to me, that's how I see all of them interrelating.
I see. That's very helpful. Thank you. Yeah. It's really neat to hear about the Positivity Project. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I've been listening to a podcast called The Happiness Lab, and it's similar. It's a professor at Yale who started this class on happiness because she saw in her students, just very high rates of anxiety, depression,
yes,
quickly turning into burnout,
lack of motivation, and yeah.
And it was just within, I'm not sure if it was the first semester or over time, but at some point, a quarter of the students at Yale enrolled in this course, which I just think is just wow. You think about that as a number.
Yes.
This is obviously something that our students need, and
yes.
Yeah, so one thing I was thinking through as you were talking about the Positivity Project, right, and I had seen that, is I've heard a lot of discussion going on lately, on the interwebs about toxic positivity, which, typically I've heard described as either dancing around or avoiding negative emotions in favor of positive ones. And I guess I was just wondering with that, with mindfulness, with the Positivity Project, how does one straddle the line between fostering these positive outlooks, in students and risking stepping into the territory of toxic positivity?
I think that's a very important topic to take a look at, because yes, there is toxic positivity. If you go around constantly pretending that everything is sunshine and roses, you are not at all processing and facing some of the things that are going to come back to haunt you in your mental health. So to me, truth is how you straddle that line between positivity and toxic positivity. If people ask me how I'm doing and I'm having a rough day, I tell them I'm having a rough day. I'm honest about it. I think where people get confused is they feel like you can't tell the truth that you're having a rough day, and that is false. The thing of it is, you don't want to just dwell on it. That's where you get into that negativity, and that holds you back. If you're going to be honest about what your emotion is or what you're feeling at that moment, that leaves you room to process that emotion effectively.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm not a student at Lakeshore, but I'm proud and grateful to hear about the work that you're doing to help, because that could, have a lifetime impact. So,
yeah, that's what I'm hoping. It's funny, we have to write goals at the beginning of the school year all the time, and boy, I tell you, a lot of the times it's very difficult for me to do that, because I honestly just always want to write down something like, well, I want to get this kid who's really shy to be able to talk, and I want to get this kid who's very arrogant to learn a little humility. I want some good people.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
I'm Nikki Herda, and you're listening to Bright, stories of hope and innovation in Michigan classrooms. Bright is brought to you in part by Mimic Insurance Company, ensuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit mimic.com/quote to see how much you can save. Today, I'm chatting with Jodie Kleymeer, a media specialist for Lakeshore Public Schools who teaches a help desk class for students. Up next, we dive into Jodie's top 3 tips for bringing mindfulness into the classroom. Well, shall we dig into our top 3 things?
Yes. All right. Let's go.
Yes. So top 3 practical strategies you have to offer us on bringing mindfulness into the classroom.
Okay. So my top 3 are probably going to look very different than someone else's top 3. Someone else might put, find a quiet location or make a little cozy place. I'm in a big media center, and we don't have that ability. We have to be there for people that are coming in and getting their needs met or whatever. So we do our mindfulness right out here in the open. So for me, my very number one strategy is to be interested in mindfulness. Have a strong why. There's that adage of kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I live by that. It doesn't matter what we're studying in my class. I like to tell them, here's why you need to know this. It's important. I'm not just doing this to cover something in the curriculum. There's an importance. There's a need for this. So that would be my number one, is to be interested in it. My number 2 is to share some research. I told you that the first thing that I did was kind of lay out, here's what mindfulness is not. Don't get caught up in this definition over here, because that's not what we're doing. And here is why we are doing it. Here are some of the benefits. So I told them some of the research that I had discovered in this Maximizing Mindfulness book, and how it actually rewires your brain. And they have brain scans, and they show, here's a person who does not participate in mindfulness activities, and here is somebody that does participate in them. And you can see very clearly how different these brains are. And then I shared with them stories about how they would have these monks come in, and they would turn the temperature in the room to like 32 degrees, and the monks could still sweat. because yeah, like, I mean, they're way advanced. That's not me. I can't do that yet. I'm not there. But I was like, whoa. And then they talked about, about the fact that it can help with the anxiety and the depression and a lot of things like high blood pressure and pain. I'm like, are you kidding me? I had one of my, I like a couple of my autoimmune disorders cause a lot of pain. So I'm in chronic pain and I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like I could potentially get my mind to blank that out and not be in pain every day. I have to look into this. And then I watched this other video, and again, I'm so sorry, but I just don't remember what school it was, probably in New York or some big city. But they have an actual class on mindfulness. And so these students that were taking the class, it was really interesting when they interviewed them. They had some very insightful and significant things to say. Kids were talking about how they have anger management issues, and taking this course helped them realize that they could look at this anger. And similarly to what John Kabat says, when you're looking at it, when you're aware of this, it diminishes that feeling. Like you can just look at it and recognize it and be like, okay, I see I'm angry. And that gives you just enough pause not to knock somebody out. It gives you just enough pause not to say that derogatory thing, or to be instigating something or whatever. Just enough pause to control yourself and to keep you out of situations that are going to get you in trouble or land you in jail or get you suspended or whatever. And he talked about how, that class just changed his life. And the kids, a number of them were like, this really needs to be a required class. Like every student needs to go through this. And so once I saw all those interviews and it was the kids themselves who were experiencing it, I thought, you know what? I need to give this opportunity to my kids. And obviously it's not I can't do it for the whole hour, but it's something that I can expose them to. And if it begins to work and if they begin to see a difference, then maybe like me, they'll start to dive in it more on their own personal time, and it can potentially change the course of their life.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Wow. I was kind of wondering, and if I'm jumping ahead to tip 3, you can stop me. But I was wondering, so how do you said obviously, you can't do this the whole class. So how do you structure this just in your, the time that you have typically on an average day?
Basically, well, yeah, it actually kind of is a little bit tip 3.
Well, then let's go into that.
My third tip is kind of a 2-parter. The first part is exposure, and the second part is choice. So here's where I'm coming from about that. First, what I've been doing in these first 3 weeks, I've been just exposing them to different types of mindfulness. So some of them are on breathing, some of them focus on movement or sound or looking at an object or positive thoughts or whatever. There's a myriad of different ones. So I expose them these first 3 weeks on a daily basis between 1 minute and 7 minutes to different types of mindfulness activities. So sometimes, we're in the middle of the library stretching out, and we look a little odd, but we don't care. And so that's the first part. So we're getting ready to, tomorrow actually, move into choice. So they've been exposed to all these different things. And YouTube has just a plethora of different guided meditations, breathing exercises, movement exercises, all those things. So now that they know what they like, what they don't like, they can choose their own. So I just give them a limit and say, okay, today you needed 5 minutes or less. And then I let them go. And they can go in this corner or that corner, because some of them want to be stretching out and some of them want to be, listening to something, and some of them want to be doing their breathing. And so whatever works for them. And so every day after we do the mindfulness activity that I expose them, we talk about it and we compare it. What did you like? What did you not like? Okay, we did these 2 breathing ones. We did a wave breathing one. What did you like? What did you not like? So they've been able to have time to reflect, and we put it out there too, like, okay, one day a movement mindfulness activity might be what you need, and another day a breathing one might be, and another day a positivity one might be what you need. So it's not like you're gonna every day just do this one, unless you want to, but think about what it is that you need for that day and steer your mindfulness activity toward that so that you can get what you need. And so I think exposing them to the different kinds and then giving them that choice. And I told them in advance, that's what we're going to do. So we're going to take these first 3 weeks, just so you know, some of them you're going to hate. That's okay. It's no offense to me. Some of them I hate. So, I guess hate's a strong word, but I don't prefer them. But, I think giving students the option, and I talk to them too about the fact that I'm not in your head. I can't make you focus. I can't make you breathe. I can't make you do this. And I don't want to make you do this. I'm telling you, I'm doing this as a tool because I know so many of you struggle with anxiety and mental health and all kinds of different issues. So this is a tool for you that I want you to be able to take long after you leave my class and use for your own fortitude. And we talked too about the fact that some people are going to be better at this. Some people are going to be more inclined to it than others. And there are kids that aren't struggling with anxiety and depression who still love this. They love just getting relaxed. They love getting focused. And so just for everybody, it's a little bit different. And we talk about how that is okay. And one of our positivity traits was grace. And I talked about how we really need to provide ourselves grace, because if focusing is something you're struggling with, like I was, I get 2 minutes into and I'm already doing a grocery list, or, I got to get this thing on the car fixed, or, all these different things that don't pertain to what I'm doing. And so we talked about the fact that when that happens, you don't beat yourself up about it. You just notice that you've lost track and you pull yourself back. That's all you do. You're not to feel guilty about it. You're not to put yourself down for it. You're to just recognize, oops, I fell off the path. Let's get back on. And that's it.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I know, actually, I tried to meditate this morning and I had that happen too. And it's kind of like some days you're like, well, okay, 7 minutes went by and I mostly thought about, what I had to do today. That wasn't my goal, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I'll try again tomorrow. So I wanted to ask one quick question. Just, do you have any tools that are your preferred? I know you mentioned just, YouTube has a bunch. Any other tools you want to share with people?
Well, I can tell you, personally, I'm fairly on the cheap side of things. So until I know something really is working and effective, I'm not going to spend money on it. And so honestly, I have been, our school gave us a subscription to Headspace. So I've been using Headspace a little bit, and then just any free apps, honestly. There's so many different free apps. And so that's where I'm at, is all the free stuff at this particular point in time.
I also like Insight Timer. That one's free.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen that one.
And there's tons of podcasts. I listened to Meryl, what's her? I just listened to it yesterday. And it was really good. The title of it was We Don't Talk About Bruno.
My favorite is Tara Brach.
I've heard of her, but I haven't listened to her.
She has a bunch of free podcasts and meditations on, I know it's on Spotify. I'm assuming it's on other platforms too.
Okay. It's Meryl Arnett.
Meryl Arnett.
Yes. And I've got a person from who is a certified mindfulness instructor. And he's going to come in and do a 15 to 20 minute lesson with my kiddos in March. So I'm excited about that. And I want to pick his brain because I can't spend 15, 20 minutes every day. I can't eat up that much of our class time. And so I get the frustration with why a lot of educators probably wouldn't do this at all. But I have 10 minutes. I'm like a 5 to 10 minutes. That's what I'm willing to give up and whatnot. And so I want to talk to him and pick his brain about, well, what else can I do in that 5 to 10 minutes? And actually, it was funny because as I was brainstorming yesterday, I thought about the fact that I think once a week, I want to bring more of that research component in, where I show the kids, instead of just telling them about it, like actually show them some of the research. So
yeah, I love the way you've described all this with, bringing in choice. I think, that's obviously like so important for student engagement. Even that made me think about like my own way of thinking about practicing. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's great. If you say, oh, well, today maybe, breathing is great. Today maybe loving compassion practice is great. Whatever your, technique
and
of choice is.
As you do the mindfulness more often, my assumption is you're going to be able to read yourself a little faster and know, my body seems tight today, I'm going to do a movement one. Or I seem nervous today, I'm going to do a breathing one. Or, boy, I've had a lot of negative thoughts, so I better do a positivity one. Or whatever it is. So I think they'll be able to recognize what they need better as they go along. I really hope that someone else who's listening to this podcast who is hesitant about starting this in their classroom can hear from someone who feels strongly about this and yet knows very little. I mean, there's oceans deep of knowledge and I know like a mud puddle. But I'm doing it. I'm going to walk forward and I'm going to keep learning and keep going because that's how important I believe it is for my students.
Can you tell me about a time when you saw mindfulness have a profound effect on a student's life? And that being said, I do know you said it's only been a few weeks, but just, maybe profound, even if it was just like they went, wow, and had some realization.
Well, I have to say that some of the things that I see as profound might be different, but I have a student who actually has my class 2 hours in a row. So they had it last semester and then they're taking it twice this semester. And so at the beginning of the hour, I give them the choice. I'm like, okay, you've already done mindfulness last hour. If you don't want to do it again, you don't need to. But they still do. And to me, for only having done it a couple of weeks, it's making an impact in a short time.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking when you were talking about the ocean's deep and then like the mud puddle. It's like,
Yes.
It does really seem like this is something where, yeah, I'm sure if you got ocean's deep, you'd get some real benefits, but you get benefits from
even the mud puddle. Yeah. And I would also have to say that there are times when we're doing mindfulness, other students come in and they'll just join us. They're not even in my class.
Cool. Can you tell me about a teacher who had a positive impact on your life?
Man, there have been a number of positive influences. I have to say that one of my top favorites is probably Mr. Gormley. He was my physics teacher. And also, I was his aide for one of the hours of the day. And he was like a grandfather, sort of, to me. He made me feel valued. He cared about me. He checked in on me, and to me it was that type of feeling that I wanted to convey. To me, I think the subject matter is fascinating and wonderful, but at the end of the day, the bottom line to me is always going to be about the soul of the person and how, as an educator, I can affect them. Because you can learn anything at any time, technically, You can basically learn how to fly a plane on YouTube.
Yeah.
We really can share that type of information quite easily. And so to me, at the end of the day, it's those connections that we make as human beings, and getting our kids to care about other human beings and be interested in being an effective citizen of this planet. That's what I'm concerned about at the end of the day.
Without a doubt, it's challenging work to find ways to fit mindfulness and other social emotional practices into a daily schedule jam-packed with other curricular demands. But with leaders like Jodie forging our path forward, if there's one thing we're certain of, it's that the future is bright. Do you know someone who's an inspiring Michigan educator who should be featured on our show? Send us an email at bright@michiganvirtual.org to let us know who they are and why we should interview them. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Bright, Stories of Hope and Innovation in Michigan Classrooms. This podcast is produced by Herbie Gaylord, is hosted by me, Nikki Herda, and is shaped by many of our passionate and talented colleagues. Big thanks to Christy Trombetta, Kristen DeBruler, Terrence Wilkerson, Anna Boyer, Sarah Hill, and Brandon Batista for their contributions to this episode. Bright is brought to you in part by Mimic Insurance Company, insuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit mimic.com/quote to see how much you can save. The Bright podcast is made possible by Michigan Virtual, a nonprofit organization that's leading and collaborating to build learning environments for tomorrow. Education is changing faster than ever. Discover new models and resources to move learning forward at your school at michiganvirtual.org.